Hey guys, so in this tutorial we are going to learn how to build a full stack application in Flutter where I'm going to make use of Node.js as a backend with MongoDB database. So basically we are going to build a to-do application in Flutter where the user will be able to register himself into the application and get logged in into the application using his credentials and will be able to create his own to-do nodes. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so this tutorial will be covered in part wise. So in this part, I'm going to cover how to create a Node.js application and how to install different modules for our Node.js backend. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so here I have opened my Visual Studio IDE. So first of all, we need to create a folder for our Node.js project. So you can just go to this open folder, and in desktop I have created a empty folder named Node.js project. So just open it in your IDE, something like this. Okay, so to make this folder as your Node.js application, you need to run some command. So just go to this terminal, new terminal. Okay, and here you just need to enter npm init. Okay, so to run npm, first of all we need to install Node.js in our computer. So you can just visit Google and install Node.js in your PC. So here after entering, you can see it is asking you your Node.js project name. So you can just keep it empty or you can just give a name. So I will just give as to do, and version is 1.1.1. So just enter everything. So there is no much required for the demo purpose. Okay, so you can see after doing init, your project has created a new JSON file, that is package.json file, where your all the requirement of your Node.js application is listed over here. For example, name of your project, version, description, and owner and everything. Okay, so our Node.js project is ready. Okay, so we need to install different modules, that is dependency, or you can call it as library for our Node.js project. So we need to install them such as Express, NodeMailer, Mongoose, MongoDB, and body parser, and various modules that are required in our project. So let's install them and learn how to install it. So here in the terminal, just enter npm install and specify the module or a dependency that you want to install. For example, I want to install Express, that is been used to create a Node.js project for creating APIs, routes and everything. So I'm going to make use of Express for that. And the second thing is Mongoose, and then I'm going to make use of body parser. So let's use them. Okay, so you can just enter as many as modules you want to install over here. So let's wait. Okay, so once the modules has been successfully installed in our system or in our project, you can see a node module project a folder is been created automatically, and you can see in our package.json file there is a dependency key is been created, that is object is been created inside which these packages are been included. Okay, and we can install different modules such as bcrypt, uh, JSON Web Token and everything, JWT. Okay, so let's install that also. Okay, so I just forgot one more package to be installed, that is NodeMon. Okay, so let's install it. So it is basically used in automatically restarting our server or our backend whenever there is changes in our code. Okay, so let's install it. Node npm install NodeMon. Okay, so it has been installed in our Node.js project. Okay, so now let's create files for our Node.js project. So here, first of all, just click over here in this project structure and just click on this icon, that is new file. And here, first of all, create index.js, that will be our starting point of our Node.js application. And then create one more file, that is app.js, where we are going to make use of Express.js to create routes and everything. Okay, so here first of all let's install express.js. So if you want to import any package, you just need to make use of required keyword and express that package, something like this. Okay, and then uh, here const app is equal to express. So I'm just making use of this const variable to import our express module. So I'm just creating an instance of it. Okay, and now let's make use of module dot export, and we are going to export our app, that is our express, so that we can make use of this app.js anywhere inside our project by importing this app.js file. Okay, so now let's import this file in index.js and create our express server. Okay, so here const app is equal to require dot slash app. Okay, so by doing this, everything that is in this folder will get imported in this index.js. Now you can just create your server. So to create your server, first of all we need to define a port. So let's create a const variable over here. So our port will be running on 3000. You can keep it anything as per your needs. So I will just keep it as usual, that is 3000. And now here app dot listen, and here specify the port and declare it as a function, something like this. So here let's give a log saying that our server is running on this port. Okay, so let's save this and run our project. So let's check the output. So to run our project, all you need to do is you just need to use node and your file that you want to execute. So in our case it is node.js. Okay, so I think something went wrong, so it is giving an error. So let's check it out. Okay, so here express will be a function, so you just need to declare it as a function. Okay, so now let's run. So you can see our server is running on this port. Okay, so now let's create a simple route where whenever we hit our this port will get executed and we will get a response on our browser. Okay, so for that here app dot, so we are going to create a get request. So get, and our route will be a root folder. So root, here we need to declare two requests, that is request and response for our browser, and declare it as a function, something like this. Okay, and here response dot send, and just pass a message. So I will just pass hello world. Okay, and let's save this file and then run our project and node install index.js, sorry. Okay, so our app has been running on this port. So let's check it out. So when I hit this 3000 port, you can see I'm getting hello world as a response. So let's change the message and check. Okay, so I need to stop this project and restart it to check the changes. So you can see. Okay, so as you saw, I need to stop this app for any changes to be reflected. So for that I have installed a package called as NodeMailer. So let's use that. So to use that, all you need to do is just go to this script tag over here, and here just remove this, or you can just give a comma over here, and here define a new parameters, that is due tag. And inside due tag you just need to make specify which file you want to run whenever you make any changes. Okay, so node mon, I want to run index.js. So I'm just defining whenever there is any changes in our file and I just save the file, node mod will rerun this index.js file. Okay, so let's do that and let's check if it is working or no. So to run our nodemon, all you need to do is you just need to make use of npm run dev. So we have declared this key we want to run, and whenever we run by making use of run key, so we are just defining to run our nodemon index.js. Okay, so to run this you just need to run this command. Okay, so you can see nodemon is running. Okay, so now if I do any changes over here, so let's give something like this message and save it, you can see nodemon is getting restarted and reflecting our data on our server side. Okay, so let me add two more dots, hit save, and you can see it has been running on this port with a latest update. So in this tutorial I'm going to give a proper structure for our node.js project. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so here I have created an architecture for you. So we have a front end, that is our Flutter application, through which a user makes HTTP calls by making use of get and post method. Okay, and in backend these are the architecture we are going to follow. So we have routers, controllers, services and models. So routes are basically a URL, and the controller is basically responsible for getting the data requested from the user and communicating with our model and returning back the data, that is responding back the data to our server. Okay, and here service is basically responsible for communicating with our database. Okay, so let's go to our project again and create these folders. So you can just click on this icon and create folders. So first folder will be our routes. Okay, so I have created 4 folders, that is controller, model, routes and services, and we also need one more folder, that is configuration. Okay, so in this folder we are going to configure our application such as database connectivity and everything we are going to do in this folder. In the third part we are going to learn how to get connected to our MongoDB database. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so to get connected to MongoDB database, we are going to make use of a library or a module called as Mongoose. Okay, so we have already installed it in our previous tutorial, that is first part. So you can see Mongoose is been installed. So if you have not installed, then you can just make use of npm I and then the model name, that is Mongoose. Okay, so just enter this command and hit enter, and the package will get installed, the latest version. Okay, so now let's get connected to our MongoDB database by making use of Mongoose. Okay, so for that the MongoDB database configuration will be done in this config folder. Okay, so here create a file, that is JavaScript file, and name it as db.js, or you can name it anything. Okay, so first of all let me show you my MongoDB compose that is been installed in my operating system, that is Windows. So you can see this is the URL to get connected to my local MongoDB database. Okay, I can just connect and you can see these are the database that is been created by me. Okay, so to this database I want to connect by making use of my backend code. Okay, so here first of all we need to import our Mongoose library. So const Mongoose, so we are going to make use of require to import the library, import Mongoose. Okay, so now let's make use of this instance and create a database connectivity. So for that const connect connection is equal to mongoose dot create connection. Okay, so this is the inbuilt functions to get connected to our MongoDB database, and here you need to pass the URL of our database connectivity. Okay, so if we go to our MongoDB compose, you can see this is the URL to get connected to my local database. Okay, so you just need to pass it over here. Okay, and then to use this connectivity string anywhere in our project, you need to install import it. So you can just make use of module.export is equal to connection. Okay, so to check if our MongoDB connection was successful or no, you can just make use of its function, that is on function. and here there is a property called as open. So if our database get connected successfully, so this function will get called, and you can just print a log over here. Okay, so I'm just printing a log as MongoDB connected. Okay, and if suppose if there is an error in database connectivity, you can just print the error. Okay, so here on error, and here we can just use a function, and let's print an error. Okay, so this is all you need to do to get connected to our MongoDB database. Okay, so let's check this if it is working or no. So what all you need to do is you just need to import this file in our index.js. Okay, so import it. Const db is equal to require dot configuration, one second, yeah, configuration dot db dot js. Okay, that's it. Okay, so now if I run npm run div, okay, so you can see it is showing an error, app crash. So let me check it. Okay, so it is saying already in used, I think so the port 3000 is in used. Okay, so now let me try npm. Okay, so you can see server has been created, but I get a database connectivity issue, I think so. Okay, so I think I cannot use this local host, so I need to give a local host IP address. So our local host IP address will be 2127.0.0.1. Okay, so now if I save the file and restart my code, you can see MongoDB database connected. Okay, so that's all for this video tutorial. So in our second next part, that is fourth part, we are going to create a database schema model for user, where a user will be able to register and log in through it by making use of the database. Okay, in this tutorial we are going to create a user model where the user will be able to register himself into a user collection database and get signed in into our app by making use of his database. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so let's create a user model in models folder. Okay, so you can just right click, create file, and name it as user.model.js. Okay, so this will be our MongoDB database user model schema. So here first of all import Mongoose model. Okay, and then we will also import our database connectivity file, that is our configuration. We have a database connectivity file, so we need to import this also over here. Okay, so now let's create a user schema. So for that, from our Mongoose library we need to import schema property. So you can do something like this: const is equal to Mongoose. Okay, so inside this we need to define which property you are going to import. So we need schema property, so you can just define it something like this. Okay, so now let's create a user schema over here. So const user schema is equal to new schema. Okay, so inside our database user schema database, what all entries we need to store, we need to define it over here. For example, we have username and password, that's it. Okay, so you can just define the tuples over here. Okay, and second one is the password. Okay, so email will be of type string. Okay, so by default we need to make the email lowercase, so you can just pass lowercase over here. Required property will be true. Okay, so email will be a required property, and we must keep it unique. For every user a unique email will be there, so unique. Okay, so the same thing for a password field. Okay, so you can just remove this lowercase and uniqueness also. Yeah, so our schema is ready. You just need to call the database and create this schema in our database. Okay, so for that, const user model is equal to db dot model, and you can just name your database collection name. Okay, so I will just name it as user, and here we need to pass our schema. Okay, so just pass it over here like this. Okay, so now we need to import this file so that we can make use of this user schema anywhere in our project. Okay, so just import this using module.export user model. Okay, so our user schema has been created. So let's import the schema in our index.js and let's check if this schema is getting created in our database or no. Okay, you can just import it over here. User model require, and here you just need to define the path. So our path is model user schema. Okay, so now let's run our project and check if our database is getting created or no. So to run npm run dev, enter. Okay, so it is asking a permission of our database. So you can see database has been connected. So let's open my MongoDB compose and check if our database got created with user schema or no. Okay, so this is my local host. Okay, so you can see my database name was, so I just forgot to create a database name over here. So let's name it as, I will just name it as new to do. Okay, so because I already have a database by to do database, so I'll just give a database name as something like this. Okay, so let's me restart our project and let's check. Okay, so after refreshing our MongoDB compose for 2 times, I can see our database has been created with a user schema over here. Okay, this part we are going to create a API, that is user registration API, through which a user can register himself in our database. Okay, so let's get started. So in our previous tutorial we have created 3 folders, that is routes, controllers and services, and in routes we are going to define all the APIs such as user registration, login, and in controller we are going to handle request and response from the front end, and in services we are going to do CRUD operations to our database. Okay, so let's get started and create files in this folder. Okay, so in services folder I'm going to create a file by name user.services. Okay, and in controllers I'm going to create a user controller file. So user controller.js, and in routes we are going to create a user route. So user.route.js. Okay, so here whenever a user hits any API, so the routes folder will get activated, that is our API, and it will call our controller, and in controller we are going to handle, as I said, that is request and responses, and in from controllers folder we are going to hit the service folder, and in service folder we are going to perform all the database operation. Okay, at the end we are going to everything is going to happen in this service folder. Okay, so let's begin coding from the service folder and then come to controllers folder, and then we will just create a API. Okay, so let's create a class over here and create a function for registration. Okay, so here create a class. So let's name it as user service. Okay, and let's export it. Model dot export is equal to user services. Okay, and inside this we are going to create a function. So let's create it. So static async. So let's name it as registration user. Okay, so this function accept two parameters, that is our email and password. So let's add it, email and password. Okay, so now let's add a try and clash block over here to handle the errors. Okay, and so we are going to create a database, that is we are going to store the user pass data to our database model. So we need to import this user model. So let's import it over here. So here const user model is equal to require, and let's give a path of our database model. So model dot user model. Okay, so now to store this data that the user has passed, all you need to do is you just need to create a variable const create user is equal to new user model, and here you need to pass these two data, that is username and password. Okay, and here the object will get created, and then all you need to do is you just need to return await, and then just make use of a object dot save. Okay, so by doing this, the whatever the data comes to this function, that is username and password, will get stored in our database model database. Okay, yeah. Okay, so we are done with the services folder. So now let's go to our controller folder and code a function over there. Okay, so now in controllers folder, first of all we need to import these services so that we can make use of this function. So here you just need to import it. So const user service require, and just give a path to the file. So services dot user services. Okay, and now here let's create a function that will handle our request and response from the front end. So here export dot register. Okay, so this is our function name is equal to async, and in this async we are going to accept three parameters, that is request from the front end and the response to a front end, and then next. Okay, so we have created a registration function or a controller. So in this, let's add a try and catch block. Okay, so in this try block we are going to pass the data to our services folder to register the user. Okay, so let's do it now. Okay, so in request body, so request dot body, we will get the data, that is email and password from our front end. So we need to get the data first. So here const is equal to request dot body. Okay, and here we will get email and password object. Okay, and now here const success response, I will just name the parameter, is equal to await user services dot register user, and here let's pass these two variables. Okay, so after successful registration of a user, we need to response back to our front end. So we are going to make use of this response parameter. Okay, so response.json, and here we are going to pass two objects, that is status as true, and in success we can just pass a message. Okay, so now let's go to our routes folder and create a API, that is a registration API. So for that, first of all we need to import routers from our express library. So const route is equal to require, and here let's make use of express module, and from this we are going to import routers. function. Okay, and then routers dot post method we are going to make use of, and here let's define a API. So here let me name the API as registration, and here we just need to call our user controller function, that is registration. So we need to import this file as we have exported it. Okay, so here let's import it. So const user controller. Okay, so here we need to define a function. So let's call user controller dot register. Okay, and finally we need to import this route. So model dot export is equal to route. And now let's go to app.js and let's define this API over there. Okay, so here first of all we need some body parser so that we can response back to our server by making use of JSON response.json. So we need body parser, and also we need it to read the data that comes in our request body. Okay, so here const body parser is equal to require, and then here app dot use body parser dot json. Okay, so body parser is just used to check whatever data that comes from our body in our routes, this one request body. Okay, so for that purpose we are going to make use of this body parser. Okay, so now we need to use this routes, and let's initialize it. So first of all we need to import this file. So const user route require. Okay, so the file is somewhere routes, yeah, dot user routes. Okay, and after this body parser, use body parser app dot use root directory user route. Okay, so our API is been ready. So now whenever a user hits this API and pass the data, that is username and password for the registration purpose, the controller's registration function will get called, and in this we are going to call services by passing these two parameters to our function registration user, and in registration user we are going to store the data in our database. Okay, so let's check this API in our Postman. Okay, so let's open a terminal and run our project. So npm run dev. Okay, so let's open my Postman. Okay, so Postman has been opened, and you can see it is, so this is my previous thing. Okay, so let's me copy our API name. Okay, registration. Okay, and then here there is nothing needed. So here we are going to pass two parameters, that is email and password, and this parameter will get stored in our database. Okay, so now let's check if this is working or no. So I will just hit the submit button. Okay, so you can see the response we have got, that is user registered successfully. Okay, so in our code also you can see there is no error. Okay, so now let me find it. So you can see we have successfully registered a user in our database. Okay, so and the next thing is we need to encrypt this password. So as you saw, the password is getting stored as it is in a string format, so we need to hash is or decrypt it. So let's do it now. Okay, so to encrypt a user password, we need to make some changes in our database model schema. Okay, so here we need to create a function that will automatically encrypt our password and store a encrypted hash in our database. Okay, so let's create a function over here, so it will just automatically handle it. So for this we are going to make use of a library that is bcrypt. Okay, so we have added it over here. Yeah. Okay, so let's import it. Okay, so let's create a function for our schema over here. Okay, so it will be user schema dot pre. Okay, so this is the schema function, inbuilt function. So inside this we are going to make use of save property. So whenever a user saves the database, so it happens over here. Yeah, so this function will get called and password will get automatically decrypted. Okay, so we need to define it over here. So async function. Okay, and here let's make use of try catch. Okay, and here variable user is equal to this. Okay, so user is equal to this means we are going to just refer this schema. Okay, okay, and now here const salt is equal to await bcrypt dot generate salt. Okay, and you can just pass any parameter over here, so I'll just pass as 10. So we are going to initialize our salt to encrypt our password. Okay, so here hash password is equal to await bcrypt dot hash, and where we are going to pass the user entered password, so it will come from user dot password, and then we are going to pass a salt to it. Okay, and the password encrypted version of password will get stored in this hab, so we are going to store this in our database. Okay, so for that user dot password is equal to hash password. Okay, so now let me refresh or restart our node project. Okay, and now let make a call to our API. So this time let's change the email address. Okay, so I will just keep the password as 12355. Okay, so it was successfully registered. So let's check our database. Okay, so you can see our passwords got encrypted in hashtag. Okay, okay, so we have successfully created a user registration API. So in this tutorial, we are going to create a Flutter app through which a user can register himself by using Flutter app. Okay, so I have already created a UI design for this, that is a login and registration page. You can see over here. Okay, so you can just get this source code from my GitHub repository. I will just share it in my description. Okay, so in this tutorial, we are going to connect our Flutter project to our Node.js backend and get completed with the registration part. So the user will be able to enter his email and password and register himself in our database. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so before getting started, let me explain you what all been done in the UI part. Okay, so over here I have created 4 files, that is app logo, login page, main.dart and registration. Okay, so in main.dart I am just simply calling a login page. So whenever our app launches, the login page will get shown to the user. Okay, and here I have created a app logo, that is the common widget, that is stateless widget, so that I can just import this common logo and show it in our login and registration page, as you can see over here. So this is the logo been shown on both the pages. Okay, so let's go to registration page. Okay, so in registration page I have 2 text fields, that is email and password. Okay, you can see email and password the user can enter, and there is a button over here. Okay, so let me tell you that I'm making use of velocity X for the UI purpose. Okay, so there is a button, so whenever this button is been pressed, I want to register the user in our database. Okay, so here I have already attached a controller for both the text fields. So for that I have created a text editing controller over here, from which I can get email and password text that is been entered by a user. Okay, and then here, yeah, and here I have just attached a variable that is if the user has entered any data in this text field or no, and depending on that we can just show a proper message to the user. Okay. Okay, now all I need to do is whenever the user press on this registration button, I need to get the data from this text fields and send it to our backend. So for that we need to create a function. So let's get started from here. Okay, so here I will just create a function void register user. I can give any name. Okay, so this function will be of type async because we are going to make a use of internet calls, so it may require some time. Okay, and now first of all we need to check if a user has entered any data in this text fields or no. Okay, so for that here let me add a if condition. If email controller dot text dot is not empty and password controller dot text dot is not empty. So if it is not empty, then we are going to send this data to our front end, and if it is empty, we are going to show a error message to a user. Okay, so over here let's make use of set state method function, and here I have a variable by name is not valid, and here we need to just set it to true if it is not valid. Okay, so let me hot refresh. Okay, so you can see I have a device been connected over here, and it has been connected to a USB, and I can just say see my screen on my laptop. Okay, okay, so I will just keep it empty and just submit it, and let's check if there is any update. Okay, so I just forgot to call this function when the button is been pressed, so there was no response from the UI. Okay, so when this registration button is been pressed, I want to call the above function. Okay, so get register user. Okay, so let me hot refresh now and allow. Let's check what happens. Let's go to registration page. Okay, so I will just keep it empty and just submit. You can see there is a validation been done now. So now here inside this we need to make a HTTP post request. So for that we need to install HTTP library. So just go to pub specification.yaml file, and under dependency section over here just add this library and hit this pubget button. Okay, and then come to main.dart page, sorry, the registration page, and over here import the package. So here http.dart as http. Okay, so now let's make a internet calls to our backend API. Okay, so here first of all we need to create an object that we need to send to our backend. So let's go to our backend and check. So you can see we need a email and password to be sent to our backend from our front end. So let's create an object for this that will be sent in a request body. Okay, so over here variable register body, so I can just name it anything. Okay, so I'll just create an object of it which will be of type JSON. So here email address, first key is email address, and the data will come from the text field that the user has entered, and then the second key will be password, and the data will come from the text field password. Okay, so from this we will just get the username, email address and password from our text field. Okay, so we have created an object. So now by making use of HTTP post request, we need to send this body to our backend over here. Okay, so let's do it now. So for that here let's create a variable response is equal to await http dot post request, and here will come our localhost IP address. So let's do it afterwards. Okay, so here URI dot parse Okay, so here inside body we need to send this request body object. Okay, so for that we need to encode it in our JSON format. Okay, and here we need to define which type of content type we are going to pass, whether it is a JSON or it is a text. So in our case it is completely a JSON format, so we need to define it in our header tag. Okay, so now this function will automatically make a call to our backend and will give a response that we sent from our backend. Okay, so you can see after successfully registering the user, we get a response as success true and message as user registered successfully. Okay, so we need to handle it in our back front end. Okay, so before doing that, let's check if this is working or no. So I will just print the response over here. So here I need to replace my URL, that is our localhost URL. So as we are going to make use of my mobile device, I need to get IP address of my system and use our backend. Okay, so for that, just open command prompt and just enter over here config. Okay, so you can see you will get your localhost IP address that you can access outside your computer. Okay, so here let's create another configuration file where I'm going to define my URLs. Okay, so here final URL is equal to my URL, http IP address, and our backend will be running on 3000 port, so let's define that also. Okay, and here let's create one more variable, so let's name it as registration, and here URL plus registration API key, route name. So let's get the route name from my backend. Okay, so this one. Okay, okay, so now to use this configuration file, all you need to do is you just need to import it over here. So import config.dart, and by doing this you can just even directly use this uh, register registration URL. Okay, so in this registration URL we have the IP address path of our backend. So IP address 3000 port, and this is our API name, route name. Okay, so let's hot refresh and check our app. Okay, I'm just going to sign in page and I'm just entering some data over here. So email address, so password 123. Okay, so now I will just hit the registration page and let's check. Okay, so now if I go to my MongoDB database and refresh, okay, nothing is happening. Yeah. So I just forgot to run my backend. Okay, so npm run dev. Okay, now let's check by clicking on the registration page. Okay, so I have done that. Hope the hope it got registered. Yeah, so you can see it got registered. Okay, so now I need to handle the response that comes from our backend to our front end. So you can see, I think so we also got the response over here. So it must be there somewhere over here, but I'm not able to find it. Yeah, so it's okay. Okay, so let's check once again. So app is got restarted. Okay, so you can see the response is of type, it is showing just printing instance of response. Okay, so I already know that what kind of response I get from the backend. You can see this is the response that I get from the backend. We have status as true. Okay, so let's use it over here. Okay, and then here I need to decode it. So JSON response is equal to for this response I need to decode it in JSON format. Okay, so JSON decode, and let's pass the response over here. Okay, yeah, so hot refresh again. So now let's check what response I get over here. Okay, so now let's check. Okay, register. Okay, so you can see we got a response as true in this success key. Okay, so then depending on this variable we need to navigate the user back to our login screen. Okay, so here if, let's make use of if condition. So if JSON response of status was successful, then we need to navigate the user to login page, and else we can just print a message to a user. Okay, so to navigate the user we will make use of navigator. So I already have a code over here. Okay, so just copy this and let's paste it over here. So if it is true, then we are going to navigate the user to login page. Okay, so hot refresh. Okay, so testing testing 2. Okay, so I'm just pressing on the login page registration button over here. So you can see I got immediately registered in my database and I am in login page now. Okay, so let me refresh. Okay, so you can see our user got registered in our database. Okay, so in this tutorial we are going to create a login API through which a user will be able to get logged in from our Flutter app. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so here as you can see I have a registration API been created. So down to it I am going to create a login API which will be of type post method. Okay, you can just copy this and paste it over here and just change the name of this API as login. Okay, so now in our controllers file we need to create a function that will be called whenever this API is been hit from the front end. Okay, so we need to create it first and then use it over here. Okay, so let's go to controllers. So controllers is in controllers folder, user controller, and you can see here we can create function something like this. Okay, so I will just copy this function and paste it down, export, and let's name this function as login. Okay, so this will be of type async, which will accept two parameters, that is request and response. Okay, so request is the data that is been requested from our front end, and response is the data that is responded from our backend to a front end. Okay, so this is it. Okay, so here from the front end we are going to pass two parameters, that is email and password, as we have done in a registration form. You can see over here. Okay, now here we must check if this email that is been passed from the front end is exist in our database or no. So let me open my MongoDB. Okay, so we must check if the user passed email address is exist in this database or no, and if it is exist then we can move further. Okay, so let's do that. So for that, we first of all we must create a function in our service folder that will make call to our MongoDB database by making use of uh, our model, that is user model. Okay, so let's go to our service folder. Okay, so over here let's create one more function where we are going to check if a user email exists in our database or no. Okay, so let's do it now. So here let's create a function, that is static function. So static async function, as we are going to make a network call to our database, we need a static function. Okay, so here let's name it as check user, and in this function we are going to pass a parameter that is email. Okay, so here let's make use of try and catch block to handle the error. Now in try block we can make use of user model and get the data that is being stored in our database of this user. Okay, so for that we can make use of return await user model, and inside this user model you can directly simply pass our email address that is been given by our user from our front end. Okay, so here if the user exists of this email address, then the data will be returned, that is the user data will be returned back to our controller. So we are going to get the data over here, and let's do that now. So const user is equal to user services dot check user. Okay, so here we need to pass our email that is been sent from the API, sorry, the app. Okay, so if this user exists, then we are going to go further. Okay, so if not user, okay, so if do not user do not exist, then we can simply throw an error. Okay, so we can just throw it as new error, and let's pass the message over here. Okay, and if the user exists, then we need to check if the password that the user has entered is correct password that he has entered previous in our database record or no. Okay, so for that we are going to make use of our model. So inside this model, as we have done this pre, we are going to compare our password and make use of Mongoose schema compare password method to compare the password by making use of bcrypt. Okay, so let's do that. So now in user model, let's create a function. So user schema dot methods dot, you can just create your own methods or functions over here. So compare. Okay, so this function will be of type async. Okay, and this function will accept one parameter, that is a password parameter that has been passed from our user front end. So I will just name it as user password. Okay, okay, so let's use try and catch block and handle our any errors. Okay, so now here const is match is equal to await bcrypt dot compare pass compare, and here we need to pass two parameters. One is our password that the user has entered, and one is the data, this password. Okay, so we need to and pass these two parameters to our bcrypt compare. So let's do that. Okay, and to pass our user a database password, we can make use of this dot password, this dot password. Okay, so our function is been ready in our user model. So just copy this function name, come back to controllers, and after checking if the user exists in our database or no, as we are going to check our password, we need to call this function immediately if our user exists. Okay, so we can do it over here. So over here const is match, you can just name it anything, is equal to user dot compare password. And to this uh, function we are going to pass the user entered password from our front end. Okay, something like this. So what this will do is it will just pass our user data from our database, that is the real database, to our user schema. And here while passing, we are passing our password that the user has entered, and we are just comparing both the password. If they are matching, then we are just so I just forgot to return over here, return is match. Okay, so this will just pass true or false depending on the matching parameter. Okay, and here it will, we will just return true or false. Okay, and now here if is match is equal to false. So if it is false, then it means that the user enter password is incorrect. Okay, so you can just throw an error. So password invalid. Okay, okay, and if our password matches, then it means that the user has logged in successfully, and now we need to make use of a response to send the response back to our front end. Okay, so let's do it by making use of JWT token. So inside our JWT token we are going to store our users data, that is user ID. Okay, so let me show you. User ID, email, we are going to store it in our JWT token. Okay, so let's do it now. Okay, so over here let token data is equal to underscore id. We will just get it from user dot underscore id, and email we will get it from user dot email id. Okay, so in this token we are going to store our user data. Okay, and now we need to encode it. So let's make use of JWT package. Okay, so for that we need to pass this data to our services folder, and in services folder we must create a function that can generate a JWT token for us. Okay, so let's create it. Okay, so over here static async generate token, and here we need to pass three parameter as per JWT rules. One is the data that you want to store in our JWT token, and one is the secret key, and one is the session time that token should be valid. Okay, so here let's create accept three parameters: token data, secret key, and third parameter is JWT expiry. Okay, so these three parameter we are going to accept in this function. Okay, and now we can just make use of return. Okay, so let's import our JWT model over here. JWT is equal to require JSON Web Token. Okay, so let me check if we have installed it or no. Okay, so it has been installed. Okay, so now JWT dot sign. Okay, so here we need to pass three parameters. One is our data, JSON token data. The second one is our secret key, and in third parameter we must pass the expiry time. Okay, so expires in JWT expire. Okay, so now our function is been ready. Okay, so now from the controller we need to encode it in a JWT format. Okay, so here const token is equal to await user services dot generate token, and you can see we are accepting three parameters. Okay, so the first parameter is our JSON data. The second parameter is our secret key. So you can just keep any secret key over here. Okay, so you can just enter 123 or anything. Okay, so we'll just keep it as it is user. So this is our string, and here we need to pass for how many time after how many time this JSON token should get expired. Okay, so you can just enter 1 hour. Okay, so after this will just generate a JWT signature and pass it to this token. Okay, so now we need to response this token back to our uh, Flutter app by making use of response. Okay, so here response dot status 200 dot JSON. Okay, so here let's pass an object. So status I will just pass as true, and token I'm just passing our token. Okay, so our the login function has been created successfully. Okay, so now in our routes folder, whenever this login API has been hit, we need to run this function. Okay, okay, so now let's check if it is working or no. Okay, so let me run my project. Okay, so let's open my Postman. Okay, so registration is over here. Okay, so let me register because I don't remember my old password of any email address. Okay, so I will just register one new email. Okay, so this is running on port 3000, so it is correct. Yeah, okay, so register. Yeah, so it is not working. Okay, so it is registration. So this is our API. Yeah, okay, so register successfully. Okay, so the same parameter I will just use it for login purpose. Okay, so let's check what response we get. So it is giving me an error, I think so. Compare password is not a function. Okay, so let me check what is an issue. Okay, so it is saying user.compare password is not a function. Okay, okay, so let me try, but I don't know if this works or no. So I will just add an await key over here. Refresh, restart our app project. Okay, so now let me try to log in. So yeah, it is not working. Okay, so I just got it. Yeah, I think so, because here I did not make use of await key. Okay, and without waiting for this response, I was just trying to make use of this data, and we are going to try the comparing password. Okay, so let's add this await key over here. So restart our project. Okay, so now let's hit. Okay, so same thing is getting repeated. Okay, so this time it is different. Okay, so it is saying data and hash argument required. Okay, so sorry, I just got this error. So after researching for some time, I got the solution for this. Okay, so when I get this data from my database, from my user database model, and I have just printed the data that we get from the database, and as I can see over here, there is no password parameter being passed by the database. Okay, so only it is passing user email address and its id. Okay, but there is no password field being passed by this function. Yeah. Okay, so due to which I was getting this error, that is data and hash argument are required, and you can see it was saying undefined. Okay, so after checking, I got to know that where I have made mistake. So over here, so here we must make use of find one, and it will just find all the data. So let's check now. Okay, so connected. Okay, so now you can see our data means the user got logged into our database, and this is the token that we can make use of in our front end to retrieve the data or to store that user's data in our Flutter app in shared preference and handle our session over there. So this is our login API. So whenever a user hits this login API, the user will get logged in into a system. Okay, so in this video tutorial, we are going to implement this API in our Flutter application through which a user can log in through our Flutter app. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so now we are in our Render Studio IDE, and here is my login page. So let me run the project on my device and show you my mobile screen. Okay, so the app is getting installed in my device. So until that, let me introduce you with the login screen, what all is been done over here. So here we have two text field where the user can enter email and password. Okay, and there is a button for from which a user can log in himself by clicking on the button. So you can see over here. Okay, so I think so the app got launched. Okay, so you can see there is a sign in page, email, password, and a login button, and user can navigate to registration page from here itself. Okay, so now so we need to create a function through which we are going to make hit to our backend uh, login API, and through this we are going to get user signed in our Flutter app. Okay, so let's do it. So here let's create a function. So let's name it as login user. Okay, and let's create this function above somewhere over here, void login user. Okay, so login user. So the function will be of type async. Okay, and we have already created the functions, that is to make a post request to our backend server. So I will just copy the code from there itself. Okay, so you can see, first of all, I'm just checking if the user has entered the data in text field or no. So let me copy this thing from the registration page, and here I'm going to create an object in which I'm going to store my email address and password that is been entered in the email address and password text field. So I'll just copy this also. Okay, request body. Okay, and then here I'm making a HTTP call by making use of HTTP package with post method, and here I'm just defining my URL to which the API should get hit. So we'll just copy this also. Okay, so I'm just pasting it just for time saving purpose. Okay, so it is request body over here. Okay, and then we need to get the response that we received from the front end backend, sorry. Okay, so here, okay, so let me show you the response that we get from the backend. so we get status as true, and inside token we get user ID and password. Okay, so the same thing we are going to get in this request body that has been decoded by using JSON decode. Okay. Okay, so as we get the response, we need to check if the status was successful or no. So here, if JSON response, okay, so you can see we get response as status true. So here status. So if the status is true, then we are going to navigate the user to dashboard page where he can enter or create his to-do list. Okay, and else we are going to just print some message on the screen. Okay, something went wrong. Okay, so for now I am just printing it on my console, so you can just show a toast message or anything, you can just replace it over here. Okay, so now if the status was success, that is the login process was success, then we need to store the user token in somewhere in the application itself. So for that we can make use of shared preference. Okay, so let's do that. Okay, so just go to pub specification.yaml file, and under dependency add shared preference. Okay, so this is the package that we are going to make use of. Okay, so with this we also need JWT decoder. Okay, so this one. Okay, so add this to libraries and hit this pubget button. Okay, so now here we need to initialize our shared preference, so let's initialize it over here. Okay, so let shared preference. Okay, so shared preference got imported automatically, so we'll just name it as preference prefers. Okay, okay, so we need to initialize it in our init method, init state. So create a function for to initialize our shared preference. Okay, so preference is equal to await shared preference dot get instance. Okay, so now you can make use of this instance to store the data in our shared preference. Okay, so for that here in a login of the successful login of the user, we need to store his data somewhere. Okay, so now as we know that our token is stored in token key, so let's use that. Okay, so variable, so I will just name it as my token is equal to JSON response. Okay, so in my token variable, our token is being stored. Okay, so let's use it to store it in our shared preference now. Okay, so for that preference dot set string, we can just define a key as token, and inside value we can just pass this variable my token. Okay, so in this key of our shared preference, our token is been stored. Okay, so immediately after this we need to navigate the user to our dashboard page. So let's create a dashboard page over here. Okay, okay, so import material.dart stateful widget dashboard page. Okay, so inside this dashboard page we need to pass our token that is been generated, so that we can make use of this token to get the username, sorry, the email address and user ID. Okay, so from this login page we need to pass the data to our dashboard page. Okay, so for that first of all we need to accept the token over here. So over here, so let's token, let's create a variable, so we'll just name it as final. Okay, and here let's accept it. Okay, so at the rate required this dot token. Okay, so now I can just send it from here by making use of navigator. So let me take the navigation code. Okay, so this is navigation code. Okay, so after successful login, I need to navigate the user to dashboard page. And here we are going to pass our token. Okay, so as we are going to pass the token data to dashboard page, so let's make use of this token data and show the user email address at the center of our dashboard screen, just for to check if the token is working or not. Okay, so you can see over here I am passing the token. So inside this we have a email address being stored. Okay, so in the dashboard page, first of all we need to import JWT decoder that we have installed in pub specification.yaml file. Okay, so you can just decode the token that we received. Okay, so now here inside init state, let's do it. Okay, so variable email. Okay, so let's do it late initialize. Okay, so now here map string dynamic, so JWT decoded. Okay, so you can just name it anything, JWT decoder dot decode, and here let's use this token. Okay, token. So to use this we must make use of widget dot token, something like this. Okay, so now email email is equal to JWT decoded token. From this we are going to take email ID, and now let's use this email ID and show it in our center of our screen. Okay, so scaffold widget, so body property, so let's make use of column main axis alignment dot center. Okay, so here children. Okay, so let's use text property, and here I will just print the email address. Okay, and let's make this column at the center. Okay, so let's check if this is working or no. Hot refresh. Okay, so let me start my backend. Npm run do. Okay, so this is my mobile screen. Hot refresh. Okay, okay, so as I remember, my username was rajat123@gmail.com. Okay, so the password is 123. Okay, so let's check. Okay, so when I press on the login button, okay, so it is saying app crashed. I think so I made some mistake. Okay, so it is saying duplicate key entry in the collection user email address. So okay, so let me go to my project. Okay, so here I am making use of registration. So instead of registration I must make use of login API. So let's do that over here. So final login is equal to URL plus the login API. Okay, so you can see in the backend we have created a login API. So this is the URL. Okay, so we must make use of this in place of this registration. Okay, so now let's stop our app and reinstall our app again. Okay, so the app got installed on my device. Okay, so let me restart my backend also. Okay, so now let's check by entering my email address and password. Okay, so I'm just hitting the login button. So let's check the response. Okay, so now you can see as we have defined, we are in our backend, sorry, the dashboard page, and here we are going to show our email address of a signed user. Okay, so now we need to keep our user logged in into our Flutter application until the session or the token get expired. Okay, so we can do it in our main.dart page. So whenever the user revisits our app after some time, he should be logged in, and as our session expired after 1 hour as defined in our backend. Okay, so you can see after 1 hour, so if it is expired, then he should be automatically navigated to login page when the session has expired. Okay, so we can keep the user signed in our Flutter application from the main.dart page. Okay, so now let's do the code over here. Okay, so to keep the user logged in our Flutter application, we must check if there is any data stored in our set preference or no. So we can do it before starting our actual app in a main function over here. Okay, so first of all, we must initialize our set preference and check if there is any data or a token been stored in the set preference or no. Okay, so we can do it over here. So widget flutter binding dot ensure initialized. Okay, so here set preference, so I'll just name this as props is equal to await set preference dot get instance. Okay, so by this I'm just creating an instance of set preference class. Okay, so now we need to pass this set preference token to get the token that is been stored in our set preference and pass it to our app. Okay, so let's do it over here. So variable token. Okay, so here we must create a constructor, so we can do it something like const my app. Okay, so per p p. Okay, so here required this dot token, and we must also accept a key over here. Okay, and now from in this my app, we need to pass our token that is being stored in our set preference, so we can do it over here. So we can do it something like preferences dot get string, and our key is token. Okay, so after successful login, if you see over here, I am storing my token that has been written by my backend in this key. I'm just storing my token. Okay, so that I'm accessing over here. So I'm just passing it to my app over here. Okay, so now let's use it to navigate the user depending on the token data. If it is expired, we are going to send the user to login page, and if it is not expired, we are going to send the user to dashboard page. Okay, so we can do it over here now. Okay, so jwt decoder dot is expired is equal to false. Okay, so if it is equal to false, then we are going to navigate the user to dashboard page. Okay, and if it has expired, so if it is true, then we are going to navigate the user to sign in page. Okay, so let's hot reload and check. Okay, so I will just stop it and reinstall the app again. So here, yeah. Okay, okay, so our app has been running on my device, you can see over here. So I was directly navigated to dashboard page as our token has not expired, and if the token has expired, we will get navigated to our login page. Okay, so let me stop our app now. Okay, so I'm just stopping it, so you can see nothing has been running over here. Okay, so I will just reopen the app again now. Okay. Okay, so you can see our app got redirected to our dashboard page as our token has not expired yet. In this tutorial, we are going to create a model in which we are going to store the user to-do list data. Okay, so let's get started with this part. So this is the ninth part. So in this part, we are going to create to-do model. Okay, and we are going to create the API also so that the user can store his to-do list into our database. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so now we are in our Visual Studio IDE and here is our Node.js project. Okay, so first of all, let's create a model, a separate model, a database collection where we are going to store our to-do list of a user. Okay, so let's just create a file and let's name it as to-do model.js. Okay, so you can just name it anything. Okay, so in this we are going to create a Mongoose schema, that is MongoDB schema. Okay, so we have already done that in our user model. So what I will do is I will just copy paste the code from here and just change the name of the schema and everything. Okay, so you can just observe me. Okay, yeah. Okay, so first of all we need to make a database connectivity. So for that, first let's import our database configuration. Okay, so you can just see, so this is our database configuration file, so it is pointing to this database. Okay, so we have done this in our previous tutorial. Okay, and the next thing is we need Mongoose, so just import it over here. Okay, and then from Mongoose we need to import the schema property, so just do it. Okay, and now let's copy the schema design also. Okay, and let's change this to from user to do schema. Okay, so you can just name it anything as per your needs, and inside content we need to change. Okay, and then there is no need of these functions, so just make a database connectivity by making use of our model. And okay, so we need to pass our to do schema over here, and we need to name this schema collection a database collection name. Okay, so I will just name as to do. Okay, and here also we can just name it as to do. Okay, and now we just need to export this model. Okay, and now let's change this schema entries, that is the properties in which we are going to store our data. Okay, so the first thing is, okay, so just remove this. Okay, so we can just name it as title and description. Okay, both are of type string, so both the properties are required. Okay, and the main thing, we need to store the user ID also. Okay, so that we can understand of which user this data is about. Okay, so we need to just create a user model over here. Okay, so to create user model we need to import our user model require. Okay, so from this we are going to just refer our user schema. So user ID type will be of type object, mongoose object. Okay, okay, and then here we need to refer our database, so we can do something like this, user model dot model name. Okay, so our user to do model is been created. Okay, so let me explain to what is been done over here. So first of all, we are going to import our database connectivity by our configuration file, and we are going to import our Mongoose, and also we need our user model so that we can refer our user data, that is a user ID. Okay, and then we are going to store title and description of this user. So if a user want to store his to do list, then he will enter ID, title and description that will get stored over here. And for the reference purpose, we need the user ID, so that by making use of user ID, we can show the data or the list of to do of a user in the Flutter app. Okay, so let me open my MongoDB compose. Okay, so let's get connected. Okay, so we have created user collection over here. Same likewise, our to do collection will get created when we run our project. Okay, so let me run the project and try. Okay, so for that, in our app.js, we need to import our model just for testing purpose. Okay, so here to do model. Okay, so let me run the project. Npm run dev database connected, and you can see once if I refresh, let's check. Okay, so you can see to do here we are going to store all our users data, as I said, that is user ID, title and description that the user enter in our Flutter app. Okay, so now let's create a API and store the data in our to do model. Okay, so for that, here in route we need to create a to do route. Okay, so I'm just keeping everything separate because it is easy and it is a good practice to develop any Node.js project. Okay, so here in route to do route.js. So likewise in the service, we will just create one more file, that is to do services.js, and in controller also we will just create to do controller.js. Okay, so here in to do route we are going to create a to do route that will be used by our front end to add data in our database. Okay, and in controllers we are going to fetch the data, that is request and response, that the user has sent from the Flutter app. And from the services.js we are going to store the data entered by a Flutter user in our database. Okay, as we have done the same thing for our user model to register himself. Okay, so now just go to do services.js, and here first of all we need to import our to do model that we have created. So you can just import something like this, and then let's create a class where we can just define various functions. So I will just name this class as to do services. Okay, you can just name it anything, and here let's create a function which by which we can just store the data in our database. Okay, so static async. Okay, so let's name it as create to do. Okay, and then first of all let's export this to do class by making use of model export. Model.export is equal to do services. Okay, so by doing this we can just import this file anywhere in our project and you can just make use of its function. Okay, so now whenever this function is being called, we need to pass three parameters, as we all know that we are going to store three datas in our database, that is user ID, title and description. Okay, so just accept three parameters over here. So user ID, title and description. Okay, and now here first of all let's create a object. So const create to do, I will just name it to do model. Okay, and here we are going to store this three data in our database. Okay, so our object has been created. Okay, and now here return await create to do dot save. Okay, so whenever we do save, any data is been passed to this function will get stored in this object by making use of this to do model class, and the data will get stored in our MongoDB database over here. Okay, now let's go to our controllers and we need to just call this function by passing this t parameter from this controller. Okay, so now in to do controller, we first of all we need to import our services that we have just exported. Okay, so const to do services. require services to do services. Okay, and here let's create a controller function by making use of exports dot. You can just create any function name, so I can just name it as create to do. Okay, so this functions accept three parameters from the front end, that is the request, response, and next. Okay, as I said in previous tutorial, in request, any data that is been sent from the front end will come in the request body, and whatever we want to send as a response to a front end will be sent to this responses. Okay, so over here try catch. Okay, so here next error. Okay, so you can just show any error if any error is being found in this try block. Okay, now here in our request we accept three parameters, that is user id, title, and description from the user. Okay, so first of all let's get those data. So const request dot body. Okay, and here we are going to accept three parameters from the front end in the JSON format. So user id, title, and description. Okay, and now this three functions, this three data, we need to send it to our services, this function. So you can just do it something like this. Let to do is equal to await to do services dot, our function name is create to do, and here we are going to pass our three data, that is user id, title, and description that we get from our front end. Okay, so after successfully creating or storing our data into our database, we need to respond it back to our front end. So we can make use of this parameter, that is response JSON. Here success, so status, so I will just keep it as true, and in success we are going to pass the data whatever is been stored in our database. Okay, and now let's go to our routers and create a route in our to do route file. Okay, so to create a route, let's open our to do route that we have created in our previous user routes file. Okay, so as you can see, we need to import express routes from the express library. Okay, and then we need to make use of this route dot post. Okay, and let's create a route and let's name it as to do create. Okay, or you can just name it as store to do. Okay, so this is our API, and whenever this API is been hit, we need to send this data to our to do controller, this function. Okay, so we need to import this file in this route. Okay, so here counts to do controller require controller to do controller. Okay, and now let's make use of this dot create to do. Okay, so now our API to store to do list has been created. Okay, so let's check this API in by making use of Postman. Okay, so now in Postman let's create one more tab over here. Okay, so we just copy this address, so it is our post method. Okay, so let's copy the API over here and paste it something like this. So from the body tag raw data JSON, we need to pass three parameter, as we all know. Okay, so let me copy this thing, paste it over here. So first one is our user ID that we need to pass from the front end. Second one is the title, and the third one is the description. DESC. This is test. This is my first to do list data. Okay, and the user ID we can just get it from our MongoDB database. Okay, so I will just select this user ID and I will just pass it over here. Okay, and now let's check if our MongoDB is working. Everything is saved. Okay, so now let's send the data to our API. Okay, hit. So it is saying to do is not a post method. Yeah. Okay, so I just forgot one thing. Okay, so after creating any new route, we need to add it in our app.js by importing it. So const to do route is equal to require to do route. Okay, and here app.use to do route. Okay, refresh. Okay, so app is getting crashed. Okay, we need to export this route also. Okay, so model.export, refresh. Okay, so you can see it is running on this port. Okay, so now let me hit this data and check if it is working. Okay, to do validation field title is required, it is saying. Okay, so I just made a spelling mistake over here. Okay, so hit. So you can see our data gets stored in our database. Okay, so let's check. Okay, so you can see the data is getting stored in our database. So let me do it once again. This is test 2. This is my second. Okay, hit, and the data will get stored in our database by user ID. Okay, so now we can make use of this user ID to fetch this data and show it in our Flutter app by making use of this user ID. Okay, so in this tutorial we are going to implement the same API in our Flutter project, through which a user will be able to make use of our Flutter app to add his to-do data in our database. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so now we are in our Android Studio IDE and this is our Flutter project, and in this project I have already covered registration, login and dashboard page. So the user will be able to register himself into our system and get logged in into the Flutter app through our system, that is NodeJS project at the backend. And on the dashboard at the center of my screen I'm just showing the logged in user email address. Okay, and yeah, so I'll just show you my mobile screen so you can see. Okay, so there is a floating action button. So when this button is being pressed, a dialog box will get opened, and in this the user can enter his title and description that he want to add his to-do list. Okay, so the same data will get stored in our database, something like this. Okay, so we need to implement this in this tutorial. Okay, so I have just covered all the things. You can just get the code, or you can just pause the video and just enter this code over here. Okay, and this, when this button is being floating action button is being pressed, I'm just showing this alert dialog at the center of my screen, something like this, and the user can enter his title and description for the to do. Okay, so let's implement the HTTP call and let's send this data to our backend to get registered with our to do data. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so now here in the dialog box, there are two text fields where the user can enter title and description that he want to add as a to do. Okay, so you can see over here. Okay, so these are the two controllers that is been attached, and the controllers is been created over here. Okay, and there is a button in the dialog box. So when this button is been pressed, I need to send this data to our backend database, that is Node.js script. Okay, so here I need to send the data, and the data will get registered into our database. Okay, so for this here, first of all, let's create a function that will make an internet call and send our data to our backend. So we have already created it in our previous tutorial, that is registration to send the data to our backend. So I will just copy the code from here instead of typing. Okay, so here you can see I have created a function. So I just copy this code, the whole thing, and paste it somewhere over here, and let's name it as add to do. Okay, so let's open this code. Okay, so here first of all we are checking if the to do controller text has been entered by the user or no. Okay, so this is our controller. Okay, so if it is not empty, then we can just perform our task. Okay, okay, so if we go to our backend, so you can see over here we need to pass three parameters, that is user ID, title and description from our front end. So let's do that over here. Okay, so it's title and description. Okay, and we also need to send our user ID, so we can get the user ID from this token. Okay, so if we go to our login page, so you can see, I think so somewhere over here I have added it. Okay, yeah, so here we get our token that is been sent from our backend. Okay, so my token. Okay, so let me show you my backend user login. Okay, so in this token we are going to store a user ID and his email address. Okay, so you can just access it from the token. Okay, something like this. Okay, so let's do that. Okay, so here I'm just decoding our JWT token by making use of JWT decoder. Okay, as I know that I'm just storing the data in underscore ID, so I need a user underscore ID. Okay, so I will just store it in our user ID. Okay, okay, so inside this user ID I am just storing the ID that has been passed by our backend in this token. So the token is over here. Okay, so we can just make use of this user ID. Okay, so we have created a JSON object body, and in this object body we are storing user ID, the title that has been added by the user from the dialog box from here, and the description. Okay, and we need to import our http package, so just import it over here. Okay, and now here in configuration you must create a link to your API. Okay, so this is our API. So our URL is this, our system IP address, and this is our API. So URL plus this API key. Okay, so I'm just using this over here. Okay, so we need to import the configuration file. So import config.dat. Okay, and for JSON encoding we just need to import this Dart converter. Okay. So now when this button is been pressed, I need to just call this function. Okay, so hot refresh and let's check if our data is getting stored in our database or no. Okay, so you can see it is showing user ID that is been signed in. Okay, so let me show you my MongoDB database. Okay, so this is the user ID that is been signed in our app. So you can see his ID is over here. Okay, and now in to do, I'm just going to add some data. So I will just add it as title1 and description1. Okay, I will just press on this add button. Okay, and now let's refresh our MongoDB compose. Okay, so you can see our data, that is to do list, got added in name of this user. Okay, so this is the identifier, so that we can make use of this identification, that is a user ID. So we can just fetch the data that has been registered by this user ID. Okay, so now we have successfully added our to do data in our to do table collection. Okay, so now when it is been successfully added, I need to just close this dialog box. Okay, so for that, here navigation, so if status is successful. Okay, so you can see I'm just sending status as success. So if it is success, then I just need to close this pop-up. Okay, so for that, navigator.pop context. Okay, so with this we also need to clear this text editor text field. Okay, dot clean. Okay, so same thing for description. Okay, so hot refresh. Okay, so I will just enter some details over here. Okay, so I will just press on this add button. So let's see what happens. Okay, so you can see it automatically got status true from the backend, and I think so the data got added in our database. So now in this tutorial, I think so this video tutorial is the 11th part. So in this tutorial, we are going to create an app API through which we need to get all the data that is being stored by the user. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so let me open my MongoDB database and let me show you where the data is getting stored if you have not watched the previous tutorials. Okay, so this is my local database, and here is the collection. Okay, so to do collection. So you can see in to do collection, I'm just storing the data that has been entered by the user from the Flutter App. Okay, so for this we have made use of this API. Okay, so now from this database, I need to fetch all the data of a particular user by making use of an API. So you can see I'm just storing a user ID over here that defines this data is of this user. Okay, okay, so I have this user somewhere over here. So this is the user, so under his name, so this all data are being stored. Okay, so for that particular user data only I need to fetch by making use of API. So let's create a API for that. Okay, so in to do route over here, let's create a API. So you can just create it by making use of router. So I'll just make use of get data. We are going to get the data stored in our database. Okay, so I can just name it as get user to do list. Okay, so this is my API name. Okay, and now I need to create a controller. So let's go to a controller first. Okay, and here this is the function. So I will just copy this function and just paste it over here and create my own function once more. Okay, so here get user to do, I can name it. Okay, so from the front end, I'm going to pass only the user ID of whose data I want to fetch. So I don't need of this title and description. I'll just remove it. Okay, and now inside services folder, I need to create one more function that communicate with the database and gives us the result. Okay, so let's go to do services folder. Okay, so let's create a same function over here to get the data. So static async. Okay, so let's give this as get to do data. Okay, and here I'm going to just pass a user ID. So just remove this both thing. Okay, so I have a model over here. Okay, so we can make use of it. Okay, and to get the data from the database, we must make use of async await so that communicating with the database may take some time. So async await to do model dot find, and in this is the command of or a query of a MongoDB Mongoose. Okay, so find user ID, find by user ID. Okay, and whatever it is find in the whatever that is been stored in our database will be returned to this variable. So I will just name it as to do data. Okay, and after getting the data, I will just pass this data to the function from where it has been called. Okay, so I just need to make use of this function now. Save the files. Okay, so to do, and here I need to just pass username to this function. Okay, and the data that is been returned by this to do services function will get stored in this to do data, and it has been respond to our front end. Okay, now let's call this controller from our route. Okay, so to do controller dot get user to do. Okay, save all the files. Yeah. Okay, so this is my API and this is the controllers. Okay, and here in controllers I am just accepting one parameter from the front end, that is user ID, and the user ID is being passed to this function get to do data, and we receive the data over here, user data, user parameter, and I'm just running a Mongoose query to find the data that is being stored in our database by making use of user ID. Okay, so this is the user ID. Okay, and the data will get returned back to the controller, and controller will just respond to our front end by making use of response key. Okay, now let's check this if it is working or no. So to do that, just run the project npm run dev. Okay, so now let me open my postman. Okay, so here let's make a request. So I'll just copy this URL. So the it is a get method, and here I need to add my API name. Okay, so the API name is this one. Okay, and here you can see in the body I need to pass the user ID. So let's pass it in the body JSON raw JSON, and here let's pass the user ID in the object form. Okay, and the user ID you can just get it from the database. Okay, so I know this is my user. So this user data is being stored in this database. Yeah. So this is the user. You can see F8, and these are the data of that user. Yeah. So F8 one, BF1. So this is one, and this is some other user's data. Okay. So here I need to just pass the user ID. Okay, and our backend is running. You can see. Okay, so I will just hit and you can just see we get a response of that particular user to do data. Okay, so these are the two datas of that particular user. Okay, so let's pass some other users ID over here and check. Okay, I think so. So 66068. So this user is, yeah, so this is the user. We'll just copy the user ID and paste it over here. Okay, so this data will be passed from our front end to get the particular user's data, as I said you. Okay, so you can see this user also has two data over here, so the data is something different. Okay, okay, so let me create one more data and let's check if I get three data or no. Okay, so for to do, okay, so in body I need to pass the user ID. So this is test 3. Okay, so data was stored. So let's get all the data. So you can see I got the data of the third data that I have entered just now. Okay, so that's all for this video tutorial. So in our next part, we will just call this API from our Flutter app, and let's show the data in a list view in our Flutter app. Okay. You can see this is the API to store the data into a database, and this is to get the data of a particular user from the database. Okay, so we have implemented this in our last video tutorial to get the data from the database list. Okay, so this will just get all the data of a particular user and return us the data of a user. Okay, as you can see. Okay, so it is getting of a particular user, it is just fetching the data being stored in our database, and it is returning the list of data that we can show it in our Flutter app. Okay, and this is my Flutter app that has been connected through USB, and you can just see the screen. Okay, so let me get sign in. Okay, so you can see this is the app I have created, and it is the dummy data being shown over here. Okay, so please note that I'm not going to cover each and every UI part over here. So UI has already been completed by myself. Okay, so you can just get the source code from my GitHub repository or from my website protocodespoint.com. I will just provide the link in the description. Okay, so UI part will not be covered in this tutorial. Okay, so now here in this list, I want to show all the data that is been stored by this particular user. Okay, instead of this dummy data. Okay, so let's implement the same in this video tutorial. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so now we are in our Android Studio IDE, and here is a Flutter project being open. So in this Flutter project, I have covered all the things such as login, registration, and creating a to-do list data and storing it into our database. Okay, so now in this tutorial, we are going to fetch all the data that is been stored in our backend Node.js project from MongoDB database. Okay, and show it in our app in a list format over here. Okay, so you can see from here the user will be able to add his to-do data. Okay, and the added data I need to show in the list view. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so before getting started, let me show you the UI thing that has been done by me. Okay, so here as you can see, I have created a random list of items by making use of generator, list generator. Okay, so I'm just generating 10 data and being shown over here. Okay, and then so over here, so this is the UI part. So I have a container. So inside container, I am just showing a circle avatar size box. So let me show you side by side. Okay, so here as you can see, there is a circle avatar icon. There is a text, and there is a one more text over here. And inside after that, there is a expandable widget with a container with height as 30. So if I don't provide this height, it will work. Okay, And here decoration I have made use of to give a border radius to this container. Okay, and then there is a padding between the items. Okay, and then by making use of item builder, I am just showing all the data that is being generated in this list of items. Okay, so here I am just making use of package called as slidable, through which a user will be able to slide to delete the item from the list. Okay, something like this. Okay, so for that I have added a library that is Flutter slidable. Okay, so you can just need to add this thing. Okay, and then here I am just showing the item that is being generated, that is the index ID. So item of index ID, so this is the thing. Okay, and there is an icon and there is a leading icon being shown in this list of card list tab. Okay, so now we need to hit our database to get all the real data of a particular user and show it in the list. Okay, so let's get started from here. Okay, so now to get the data from our MongoDB database, we need to hit our backend API. So we need to hit this API. So for that, in our Flutter project, we need to create a function that will hit our API. Okay, so here somewhere over here, I can just create a function. Okay, so here I will just create a function by name get to do list, and here I will just pass one parameter that is the user ID. Okay, and this function will get called immediately as soon as this dashboard page will get opened by the user. So here from here I can just call this and pass our user ID. Okay, and you might be wondering from where this user ID is coming if you have not watched our previous tutorial. Okay, so here whenever the user gets signed in into our app, and you can see, so it is user has been successfully signed in, and the backend login API will give us a token of a user, inside which all the details of the user will be get stored. Okay, and the same thing is I'm storing it in our shared preference, and the token is being passed to our dashboard page. Okay, and here the token is been decoded by making use of JWT decoder, and from that I'm just getting the user ID and storing it in this variable. Okay, the same thing I'm just passing it to this function now. Okay, so now let's make use hit to our backend API. Okay, so we need to hit this API, so let's create a configuration file of that URL. Okay, so this is our API URL to hit. Okay, so we need to hit this API from this function. Okay, so I already made some code through which I am just hitting our database by making use of HTTP post. Okay, so I will just copy paste this code and I can use it in my other function. Okay, so I can just copy paste and paste it over here. Okay, and this function should be of type async. Okay, the post method, and here I need to call our get to do list. Okay, and let's check our backend API. So let's check what it is accepting from the front end. As you can see, it is just accepting one parameter, that is a user ID. Okay, so here in body, let's pass only the user ID. Okay, so here in the body I'm just passing it by making use of JSON encoding, and we will get all the data in this JSON response. Okay, so we get status as true, and in success we get all the data of the user. Okay, so let me open my MongoDB compose. Okay, so from this to do collection I'm just getting the data of a particular user, so I will just get all the list of data of a particular user. Okay, in this to do. Okay, so now we get all the data of the user, that is to do, in this parameter. So this parameter, this data I need to store it in our list of item in this string. Okay, so I will just remove this generated data. Okay, so it is not of type string. Okay, let's remove this final key also. Okay, so in this variable I want to store all the data that has been got in this response. Okay, so for that, item is equal to JSON response of success. Okay, and then let's call set state to update the UI. Okay, so now let's use this. So I have already used them in the list view builder. You can see item count. If item is null, then the list will be empty, else the list will be shown to the user. Okay, so number of items in this list. Okay, and then here you can see I am getting the user as title and description. So let's use this key. Okay, so here in the title. Okay, so before that, let's hot refresh and check if it is working. Okay, so you can see there are four items been shown, and the 4 item got generated. But from this data, I want only the title to be shown over here. So we can just make use of this key over here. So index of item of index of title. Okay, something like this. Hot refresh. So you can see I did. I'm just showing the item's title. Okay, so the same thing for sub description, subtitles, text. Okay, and the data is description, DESC. Okay, so hot refresh, let's check. So you can see I got the item over here. Okay, and then so it is completely working now. Okay, and now whenever the user adds one more items, means if you want to add one more item, then I need to just hit this function to get the latest data. Okay, so after adding the data I need to do that. Okay, so here add, and once the data got added into our database over here, so success true, I will just call this function again by passing the user ID. Okay, so hot refresh. Okay, so let's add some data. Okay, okay, so I'm just pressing on the add button. Okay, so you can see the item got added into the list. So let me add one more. Okay, add. So you can see the item got added into our list of items. Okay, so in this tutorial we will add a feature through which a user will be able to delete any item from his to-do list. Okay, so he just need to swap this item and just click on this delete button. Okay, so let's get started and implement the same. Okay, so to delete any item from this list of items, we need to create an API in our Node.js project. So here is my Node.js project. So let's create an API to delete any item. So I will just copy this route and let's name the API as delete to do. Okay, so this is the API name. Okay, and in controllers file over here, let's create a function, that is export function. Okay, so I'll just copy paste and just change the name of this function, delete to do. Okay, So here I need to make some changes. So before that, let me open my MongoDB compose and let me show you the data. Okay. Okay. So over here to do. Okay. So from the front end, I am going to pass this ID. Okay. And if the user pass this ID, I want to delete all this item from this to do collection. Okay. So here I need to pass an ID from the front end. Okay, so if we see, so when the user press on this item list, so we are going to pass this item ID, this ID. Okay, and we are going to delete that item from our database. Okay, so we are going to accept one ID from the front end, and in services folder here, let's create one more function, a static function that will delete an item from the list. So delete to do. Okay, so here I am accepting one parameter to this function, that is id. Okay, and now by making use of to do model dot find one and delete. Okay, so this is the mongoose query, find one and delete, and here we are going to pass our id underscore id. Okay, deleted item, we are going to return it, call back. Okay. Okay, so the same function let's use in our controller. So here we are going to pass id, deleted item will be returned back to our front end. Okay. Okay, so this function will get called from our API route. Okay, controller delete route. Okay, so controller, so let me check. id we are going to accept, and id we are going to pass it to our service folder. So inside service folder, we are going to find one and delete the data from the database. Okay, so let me save this. Okay, so now let's implement the same thing in our front end in our Flutter project. Okay, so I will just copy this API, and in configuration, let's initialize our variable. Okay, and now in dashboard page, let's create a function. Delete item, and here I will just pass the selected ID. Okay, and now let's call this function when the user press on this delete button by swapping the list view. Okay, so it happens over here. Okay, slidable, so delete. Okay. Okay, so let me show you underscore id or refresh. Okay, so you can see the item id has been passed when the button is been pressed. Okay, so from here let's call the function that we have created above. So delete item. Okay, 1 second. Yeah, so here delete item, and let's pass this selected item. Okay, now let's go to that function and let's check if we are receiving that id or not by printing it. Or refresh. Okay, so let's check. It is get printing 2 times because here also I have printed it. Okay, so now we need to make a internet call or API hit. Okay, so for that I will just copy the existing code from my previous functions. Okay, so I will just copy paste it over here. Okay, so you can see in the backend we are accepting id as a parameter from the front end. Okay, so in request body we will pass the id, and by making use of http post request we are going to hit our API. Okay, so we need to make this function as async. Okay, and here let's call the URL. Okay, so item will get deleted. Okay, so after item gets deleted we need to call get to do list again by passing the user ID. Okay, so over here if response of status is equal to, so if it is equal to true, then we are going to hit our database to get the latest data. Okay, so let's check if this is working. Okay, so let me swap and let's check if item gets deleted. Okay, so I think item is getting deleted, so let's check this if this is getting deleted from the database or no. Okay, so item got deleted, so let's go to our database and check. Okay, so to do, so there are 10, so you can see now it became 7. Okay, so let me delete one more item. So this is new data, this is to do latest data. Okay, so it is over here. Okay, so I will just swap. The item got deleted. Let me refresh. So you can see the item is getting deleted from our database also. Okay, so that's all for this video tutorial. Thanks for watching. Please do subscribe. Protocol Point. Thank you.